Okay, people. I don't know what happened, but the music on the intro was not playing for some reason on my end. I don't know what is going on there, but we are going to proceed on, and I'll welcome you to this edition of Fight IQ. My name is Tom Albano, of course, here with you back in the lab on another great Monday night of action. Lot of chaos again this week, so I apologize that the video quality is not great. I've had to move over to a different computer for various reasons, and there is stuff that went on that is for network admin eyes and ears only. A little situation that developed personally, so we are going to just we'll talk about it another time. Right now, I want to focus on everything that's going on here with this edition of Fight IQ. We're coming off of another crazy weekend. We had UFC Baku, we had PFL San Diego, and fortunately, we are going to be able to take a breather this weekend. I know fight fans and the most obsessed of fight fans love to go, go, go. Those of us who work in the MMA media space, this weekend is going to present a little bit of a break for us. I know there is still PFL Mina, the card that was supposed to happen a few weeks ago, that has now been pushed back to this week. But obviously, that does not present enough of a big deal for us to really obsess over. But all right. Sorry, Zan is texting me in the middle of the show. All right, let's get back to this. Let me try to run through all of this as much as I can. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything that is going on here at the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Every episode of Fight IQ, every episode of Fight IQ Puncher's Chance, which, by the way, personally speaking, I need a little bit of a breather. And because there are no major cards this weekend, we are going to take this weekend off for Puncher's Chance. We will instead be back with a normal Fight IQ episode next week in the Monday time slot. That will lead us to 329, obviously, the big card revolving around Conor McGregor, and we will. You can't hear my voice. What do you mean you can't hear my voice? What the? Can anyone hear me? Audio. It says my audio is live. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna call Nick Morganson. We're going to see, or Cal McClure. We're going to see if there is anybody else that is having this technical problem or not. Or you know what? Let me quickly do a refresh and let me see what's going on. All right. Well, everything that I have here says my equipment is working. So I don't know what necessarily is going on at the moment that I have a couple of people saying that they cannot hear me. Let's text Callan. All right, let's try this again. Take two. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Every episode of Fight IQ. Okay, well, okay, you do hear me. Why is this guy saying that he can't hear me? All right. So we're good then. Every episode of Fight IQ, every episode of Bandos Breakdowns, ETB Lounge, Press Row, and more. Obviously, we're streaming over to the X platform simultaneously. We thank those of you who are tuning in there. Please obviously hit the like button there, repost, quote post, or retweet, quote tweet, as us old heads like to say. And then come over to our YouTube home, youtube.com/ETB Network, where you get where you can help us grow, on that platform. That's kind of our base platform. We're over 1,100 subscribers there. Help us continue to climb the subscriber numbers, help us to continue to climb the watch hour numbers, and so much more. All right, we have a lot that we got to dive into, and obviously those technical whatnots all of a sudden completely took everything back from us. So we got to get back into this. We got UFC Baku to talk about. We have multiple varying things from UFC Baku that we got to discuss. Pretty eventful card, to say the least, for a card that maybe some people didn't tune into because either A, it was so early in the morning, or B, because they looked at it and like, not too many big names there. We'll just, skip over it. But there's something from this card that really bothers me. And what really bothers me is another week where we've got some officiating controversies. And basically, I just had a whole spiel that I gave on Deadspin, a whole editorial that I did over there. So I want to just pull it up right now, and I'm going to see if I can paste this into the YouTube chat. So that way, if anybody would like to read and follow along and everything with what I'm going to be talking about here, that, you guys can check it out. A little shameless self-promotion, but you know what? This is self-promotion, I think, of something that needs attention, and there's like a whole issue to this, because it seems like every week we deal, there it is right now, you guys can see it in the live chat. Every week it seems like we deal with something again and again and again when it comes to judging issues, when it comes to controversies. It feels frustrating to have to deal with this on a weekly basis with the people who we trust to fairly officiate, with the people we trust, or we should trust rather, to give fair rulings, call things right down the middle, protect fighters, protect the integrity of the sport. But it seems like every week that is a fail, a very major fail. And there was somebody from MMA Mania who posted an editorial the same day. I want to double check here on the name, Andrew Richardson. And Andrew basically talked about how it feels like maybe you can play a little bit of Aerosmith as I talk about this topic, because on a weekly basis, it feels like the same song and dance over and over again, where all of a sudden you can take out a fight, and plug in another fight. Take out two fighters, put in another two pairs of fighters who are competing against one another, and put this name in. This week was Jim Parados and Herb Dean. Maybe the previous week it's Chris Dignoti. And you know what? Herb Dean is a fantastic name involved this, because he is just somebody who, as much as he's an old school name in this sport, as much as he's a legendary referee name, he has had his fair share of screw ups so much over the past couple of years. And you can say what you want about the Alex Pereira controversy. We had our discussion about this a couple of weeks ago. But here, it was just a complete meltdown of issues. Now, I mentioned Jim Parados. And a lot of people probably don't know who the hell Jim Parados is. But Jim Parados was the referee for the UFC Baku first fight of the night. And I was talking first main card, first prelim. Very first fight of the night. It's Tahir Abdulayev and Jefferson Nascimento. Now, both of these guys were champions in regional MMA promotions. Tahir was the champion in UAE Warriors. Jefferson was the champion in LFA. And Jefferson had an undefeated record. So, maybe not names that you know, especially not the casuals, but at least it's an interesting matchup to start things off. Now, unfortunately, the fight was very boring. Very boring. Very little offense. Even the UFC commentary team admitted that there was going to get to the point where maybe, if you look at the unified rules of MMA, the first thing judges are supposed to focus on is effective striking and grappling. Then it's aggression, then octagon control. You judge the strikes and the grappling first. You judge the attacks and the defense first. Then you go to things like, who was the more aggressive fighter, who had more activity, who seemed to dictate the pace more, control the octagon more. And the UFC commentary team flat out admitted, we probably have to go to those latter two things in order to decide a winner here if this goes to the judges' scorecards, which is code for this fight sucks. Seriously, because even if the striking and grappling wasn't even, if it was an explosive all-out war where they're punching each other back and forth, momentum swinging, the judges at K-side probably have an idea in their mind, right or wrong, on who had the more effective strikes. But when there's so little offense in a fight, then you got to go to those other criteria. Now, the fact that there was a lack of activity wasn't the issue with Jim Parados. It was that he pointed over to Jefferson Nascimento at one point and basically gave the warning for stalling, the warning for lack of activity. And yet, if you look on the UFC stats site, and I talked about this on Deadspin, I talked about this on MMA News. If you go to the UFC stats site where they give you the statistical information and all the numbers, Jefferson Nascimento was outlanding Tahir Abdulayev. Seriously. There are numbers to back me up. So there was that issue. There was already issue, like I said, that there was a very lack of activity. And then Abdulayev hits Nascimento after the bell. Now, maybe he was winding up the punch before the bell, but it was at a point where it's like you hear the horn to end the round. He's got the time. Like, he's right there. They say in martial arts, control your weapons. He could have controlled his weapon. Instead, he didn't, and he cracked Nascimento. A foul like that deserves a 1-point deduction. But what did Jim Parados do? Oh, shame. Can't do something like that, but I'm not going to take a point. You're just going to get a hard warning. I understand hard warnings. You know, when I was competing in karate, you had caution, the warning, and then the disqualification. But there are just some fouls in this sport that deserve an automatic point deduction. You skip the hard warning. You do. And for me, that's a late hit. Whether it's a hit after a horn, you know, if the guy is winding up and the punch is basically right here as the bell's sounding, there's nothing you could do at that point except take the punch and let the punch land and whatever. But something like where it's right here, that you got to control your weapons, and that deserves an automatic point deduction. And old school fans like me, right, might remember the Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandamy, terrible women's featherweight title fight from UFC 208 in Brooklyn. And that card was already had its fair share of issues, but Jermaine Durandamy landed after the bell twice and did not get a point taken away for some reason. She ended up winning the title, and she ended up vacating the title right after that. If there was at least a point deduction, could have been a draw. If there was a 2-point deduction, Holm would have won the title. And you could have done something like Holly Holm versus Cris Cyborg. Oh, Holly Holm versus Cris Cyborg a few months before it actually happened. Regardless, it was something pretty damn egregious. And then on top of that, here's Abdulayev throwing some ground and pound at the end of the round. And even though he's throwing some powerful shots, Jefferson Nascimento is not in the biggest danger in the world. And he goes to clinch on from the bottom, clinch up to here to stop his offense. And it's that moment where Jim Parados, no, it's done, we're done. Horrible stoppage. Even the commentary team couldn't defend it. It was a hard stoppage. Nascimento got right back to his feet and was like, okay, I'm fine. We need to keep this fight going. And that was just terrible. It's a terrible way to start off UFC Baku, which is a shame because UFC Baku is a freaking fun card. You have plenty of finishes. Plenty of star-making performances. And we'll get to another one. And I would put UFC Baku in A-B+ territory because good God Almighty, then came, for everything that was good about UFC Baku, then came the co-main event of the night. And to my co-host Zan, I say, where's the crow over here? Because I'm going to come eat it. You were right. It was a boring fight. You went into it thinking it was going to be a boring fight. And I said, no, I'll give a little bit of hope. And yeah, any hope that I had was pretty much shattered. It was terrible. And once again, Herb Dean is in the center of the controversy. By the way, I'd like to double check something here in my notes for a second. The Holm versus GDR ref was Todd Anderson. That's right. Wanted to double check and make sure who it was that was going to be, who it was that was refereeing that fight. Todd Anderson. Well, Jim Parados did a great Todd Anderson impression. And you know who else did a great Todd Anderson impression on this night? Herb frickin' Dean. Michelle Pereira gets Shara Bullet down in the opening round. And Michelle Pereira gets on top. He goes to the ground and pound. And what does Shara Bullet do? He grabs the hair. Hair pulling. Hair pulling. And if I'm not mistaken, even back in the very first UFC event, when there were no rules to this sport, wasn't one of the agreed upon exceptions that there could be rules was no hair pulling? And here's Shara Bullet doing it not just once, not just twice, multiple times. Ridiculous. And what does Herb Dean do? He pauses the action. He calls the foul. And he doesn't take the point. Hard warning. Next time we're going to be trouble. All right. Second round. I'm sorry, did the second round not happen yet? Second round was god awful. And then the third round, what does Shara Bullet do during one of the scrambles? Poke in the eye. All right, well, you gave the hard warning, so now you got to take the point, right? No, according to Herb D. I don't have to. He said, again, I'm going to take a point. The amount of infractions that were missed on this freaking card. And those two fights specifically, the opener and the co-main event. Awful. And the worst part about it is Shara Bullet ended up winning. Now, Shara Bullet was my prediction for the fight. But to be clear, to be real with you, the fight should have been a draw, if not a win for Pereira. Terrible. Never let Shara Bullet or Michelle Pereira have a co-main event slot again. But it just feels like every week something happens within this sport with the judges or with the referees, the people that are appointed by the athletic commissions of the states, the government of the states, in order to help officiate, hate to use the word again, but officiate the card and make sure everything runs smoothly, protect fighters, make sure the fight is fair, make sure it's called right down the middle. And there's always something. Somebody does something stupid. And for a sport that is 30 plus years old, go actually closer to 35 years old in America, with its origins going back out of America plenty of years into the traditional martial arts. As much as we talk about MMA being in the mainstream, that it's on Paramount Plus, that you've seen it on Fox and you've seen it on CBS, the fact that we just had a card at the freaking White House, for all of that, you would expect that we would have clear judging. You would expect that the problems that have plagued the sport of professional boxing would not be impacting the sport of mixed martial arts. And yet, here we are. So, where do we go from here? Because I don't know. I feel like I'm yelling into the void. Because no matter what, no matter all these promises, we're going to have shorter leashes and all of this, hey, we're going to have more oversight over our refs and our judges. Nothing happens. When a judge gives a controversial scorecard, how often is that judge brought in to be investigated or to have to explain their actions? Little to none. When a referee makes a very bad call and is called out on it, it's pretty obvious. Little to no times do we see that referee disciplined or have to give an explanation, or hell, even worse, that the fighter appeals, that the appeal actually works and their loss or whatever gets overturned. It's so rare. And you would think in the year of our Lord 2026, halfway through the year of our Lord 2026, we would be able to figure this out by now. But I guess not. And it sucks. It actually sucks. So I'm answering my own question on my Deadspin article. Can they fix this? I don't know if they can. And it sucks. Let's talk about the rest of the action from UFC Baku. In the main event, Rafael Fiziev getting a much-needed victory. His win over Manuel Torres, who Manuel Torres was on a hell of a roll. This was an opportunity where if he had won this fight, he probably was going to get elevated into the top 10. But Rafael Fiziev actually went toe-to-toe with Torres and got the better of him. And to put a big stamp on it, what does he do? He executes a spinning wheel kick. And that's what wobbles Torres. He follows it up with some punches. Torres is he's shaky, but he's still standing. And Torres goes down in a heap. Flat, clean knockout. And for Fiziev, this is much needed because he entered the fight with 4 losses in his previous 5 fights. The only time he had won in those 5 fights was when he beat Ignacio Bahamondes at last year's UFC Baku event. He back at 325 in January, he got knocked out by Mauricio Rufy, which is not a bad loss. But when you consider momentum that when you consider the downward momentum that Fiziev was on, it wasn't good. And Fiziev also missed quite a bit of time. He fought Justin Gaethje in the close fight at 286, majority decision, got fight of the night honors. That was only his second loss, snapped a big winning streak he was on. But then he fought Mateusz Gamrot, and that's when he blew out his knee. And he missed all of 2024. He fought Gaethje in a rematch, little return fight. That was his first fight in a year and a half. Solid effort, another fight of the night, but lost. Had the win against Ignacio and then lost to Mauricio Rufy. These are not bad losses. But at the same time, for somebody like Rafael Fiziev who's trying to make a statement, well, this was the performance he needed. He needed to make a statement in a fight like this. Now, I'm going to double check because I don't know if the new meta rankings, remember AI-powered rankings now, have come out. But let's have a look and see. Over at lightweight, it says last updated Saturday, June 27th. So maybe they did update it pretty quickly. Okay, so the meta rankings have him at number 13, which is weird because he wasn't on the rankings when we looked at the meta rankings, but the UFC promoted the fight as number 11 versus number 13. Now, if we go to the media panel rankings, Rafael Fiziev is number 11. And that's where he was. Oh, but the media panel rankings are not yet updated. He's still at number 11. So you have to wonder if this is going to allow Rafael Fiziev to maybe enter the top 10 and enter some sort of conversation. Now, he did talk about a title that he wanted, but it wasn't the lightweight championship. He wants a little something different. He wants the BMF. He wants the BMF title, which, oh, baby, is he ready for what Charles Oliveira is going to bring? Because, I mean, look at those losses. Mateusz Gamrot is a very respectable talent, and again, he lost that fight because of an injury. He has 2 losses to Justin Gaethje, who is now the undisputed lightweight champion of the world, and he lost to Mauricio Rufy, who's a solid contender. But going up against a former champion like Charles Oliveira, somebody who had a dominant run in the division at one point, I don't know if Fiziev's going to be ready for that. I think Fiziev and Oliveira is a fun fight. I don't know if Fiziev wins that fight, though. A couple other shout-outs I want to give for this card. Asu Almabayev. hitting a very rare Suloev stretch submission victory. So Asu Almabayev was doing pretty damn well against Charles Johnson. This was a flyweight fight that took place on the main card. And Charles Johnson is somebody who, I mean, he's a dog. He's a dog, man. He is somebody who just stays in there, can compete with the best of them. He's fought Joshua Van, the current flyweight champion. And Almabayev just completely had his way with him, scoring multiple takedowns in the fight, landing some solid boxing on Johnson, keeping Johnson grounded for a lot of time, some dominating control. And then what happens? In the third round, he gets onto the back. Now, when you're on a fighter's back, like Asu Almabayev is, one of the instincts you might go to, I mean, the very basic instinct is going to be move your arms up, put your legs around the guy, execute a body triangle, put your arms up, see if you can get the rear naked choke. But that's not what happened. Instead, he grabbed back control, and then he's a flexible guy, managed to grab to one of Johnson's legs, and from back control, yes, while he's on the back, to the point where, in the backpack kind of position that you would see from a fighter who was executing a rear naked choke, he grabs one of Johnson's legs and hoists it, extends it out and up. It is a rare submission in both mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu, even more rare in mixed martial arts. It is a rare submission. It is a painful submission. It is a hard submission to execute. And Asu Almabayev did that. So you consider what Almabayev has done. So you wrote notes down here. So he's 7-1 now. He's now on a 3-fight win streak. And he had submitted Alex Perez leading up to this fight. He's in the top 10 at flyweight. Obviously, when you've got Manel Kape doing what he did last week, and you've got obviously a pending rematch between Joshua Van and Alexander Pantoja when Pantoja is healthy and ready, it's hard to say that Almabayev is probably going to get a title shot anytime soon. But a performance like this, he's probably put himself one, maybe more likely 2 fights away from being able to challenge whoever holds the gold at that point, whether it be Van, whether it be Pantoja, whether it be Kape, somebody. He's earned that right. Also, special shout out, Abdul Rakhman Yakhyaev, knocking out Julius Walker. The two come out, trying to feel each other out. Boom! Right hand. Walker was going in with something. Rakhman Yakhyaev read it, immediately landed the counter right. Julius Walker went down flat. He became a piece of flatbread, basically. It was 8 seconds. Tied for the second fastest knockout in light heavyweight history. The fastest knockout in UFC light heavyweight history is still Ryan Jimmo. And I believe it's 7th. Abdul Rakhman Yakhyaev's 8-second knockout. I think it's 7th, tied for 7th fastest or 8th fastest in UFC history. It was a spectacular performance. It's a performance where it's like, okay, that guy now just got a hell of a ton of momentum. And he is one of the standouts of this card. There's your standouts of the card. Rafael Fiziev, Asu Almabayev, Abdul Rakhman Yakhyaev, and in a bad note, the officiating for UFC Baku. But we also had PFL San Diego. And AJ McKee was featured in the main event, the former Bellator featherweight champion, taking on Salamat Isbulaev. Isbulaev is a tough dog. Came into this fight 10-0. He had his PFL debut back in February, defeated Jesus Pinedo, a former PFL champion. So had a lot of momentum on his side, but AJ McKee showed, in the words of Corey Anderson, and maybe I got to get this as a sound effect for this soundboard, that there are levels to this game, baby. There are levels. And AJ McKee just completely dominated him. AJ McKee is calling for a title shot. And at this point, I think we need to see AJ McKee battling for a PFL championship at some time soon now, don't we? I mean, AJ McKee, in my mind, is one of Bellator's greatest success stories. He came into the promotion, like he debuted professionally in the promotion, and they slowly built him up over the years, getting different fighters, different styles, different kinds of fighters, and different ways to win the fight, just building him up solid all-round fighter until he was ready. They entered him into the featherweight Grand Prix, and then what happens? He defeats Patricio Pitbull in the finals and ends up becoming PFL featherweight world champion. There's no better story than AJ McKee. Actually, I shouldn't say that. There are stories that you can say are great in terms of Bellator, but AJ McKee is one of the best stories. And what does he do now? He's come over to the PFL. He's 3-1 in the promotion. His only loss is to Paul Hughes. So at this point, I say, let AJ McKee be. Let AJ McKee, I think he's done something. He's built up a solid resume for himself where you can throw him into a title fight. And I'm sure people would want to tune in to watch AJ McKee challenge for a PFL World Championship. And speaking of people tuning in, leads to our next story about the UFC White House card. And this was basically, let me explain. This was done in two different ways because last week they had talked about the American numbers, and then days later they came out with global numbers. So in the US and Latin America, 17 million total viewers across the Paramount Plus platform, 8.2 million average live viewers per minute. Then you add in an additional 17 million international viewers from markets like the UK, China, Australia, India, and New Zealand. So for a total of 34 million total viewers worldwide. Platform milestone peaked at 7 million domestic US average viewers on Paramount Plus. That's a record for the streaming service. Now, you have some saying that basically it doesn't do the 17 million that you see on the US doesn't really surpass what MMA and MVP MMA was doing on the Netflix end, and Ronda Rousey was making fun of that on social media. However, saying that 34 million people watched this card, it is one of the biggest, most watched events in the promotion's history. It actually is. It's one of the highest watched global events in the sport, one of the highest watched global events for the UFC. And like I said, it did a record number for Paramount Plus. So all this back and forth about, they fell short of expectation. I mean, first of all, do you really buy into this promoter crap anymore of, 11 billion viewers are going to watch? If that many people, as many people watch as the promoters say are going to watch, then Chatri over at One Championship would be sitting on a gold mine instead of trying to eliminate the sport of MMA in his promotion. And second of all, I think this is a successful event regardless of the... Let me slow my roll. Obviously, if only a couple million people watched, it wasn't going to be a success. The fact of the matter is, they had an accomplishment on the Paramount Plus side, and 34 million people watching, with the peak viewership at one point in a minute, 7 million people watching on Paramount Plus and the number of people who tuned in combined per minute worldwide between the US and the rest of the world, this was a successful event. And if you look at what was being said on social media, number of people who were impressed by the setup of the UFC White House card, of the UFC Freedom 250 card, plus all the great action that card delivered, it was a success. So all this little brouhaha that's going on social media, stop it. Words of Michael Jordan, stop it. Really, we don't need to worry about that. I'm not worried about it. Who should be worrying something right now? Who should be worrying about something right now, about specifically his image, is Alex Pereira, who is now facing accusations of snubbing fans at a recent seminar. So here's the full story as it goes. There were accusations by fans, attendees at a appearance that he was doing in the UK, that basically said, oh, he cut his time short, he didn't shake hands and sign autographs, he had all that people paid for all these meet and greet packages, he didn't take photos. But then the agency steps in. The agency that was responsible. Let me pull up the full statement here. The organizers of this event with Alex Pereira had released a statement in the aftermath and said, quote, as the event organizer, Joy Aguirre takes full responsibility for the organization, logistics, communication, agreed deliverables surrounding these events. Alex Pereira trusted Joy Aguirre to organize and manage the tour accordingly. Unfortunately, due to miscommunication and shortcomings on our side, the agreed deliverables were not communicated clearly to Alex. As a result, changes had to be made to parts of the event. We want to make one thing very clear. Alex Pereira was not at fault. Alex was informed by Joy Aguirre that the Keeley event consisted of a 1-hour seminar, which he delivered in full. He was not late, and he completed the seminar exactly as it had been communicated to him. Alex was not informed that autograph signings, individual photos, or additional time after the seminar had been advertised or expected. He acted based on the information provided to him by Joy Aguirre. We also want to clarify the position of the Keeley seminar organizer. The organizer was fully informed of the seminar duration, at the time Alex would be present, the deliverables that had been discussed with Joy Aguirre. It is therefore very unfortunate that public statements have been made suggesting Alex Pereira was responsible for the issues surrounding the event. We want to state very clearly that he was not. And apparently the event organizers did deliver refunds to the people. So I'll give credit where it's due to Joy Aguirre. What they did was crappy. And it caused a bad spotlight for somebody who, well, unfortunately has been in the spotlight for controversial reasons. We mentioned Herb Dean earlier. Alex Pereira and Herb Dean have been, at it because of the accusations that Pereira made on illegal shots that were supposed illegal shots that were thrown during the fight at the UFC Freedom 250 event against Ciryl Gane. But I think that's a completely separate issue because, one, obviously Herb Dean's got the reputation that is required, the speech from before. And number two, that's a separate issue compared to snubbing fans. It's clear he did not purposely snub fans. He was not informed of everything that was supposed to be, done by him. So I can't really fault Alex Pereira for this. It's good to see that responsibility was taken. It's good to see that the organizers are trying to make right, but it's a shame that this has even happened in the first place. It's quite sad. And speaking of quite sad, the video of Dustin Poirier's arrest has been released. You see Poirier in an airport clearly intoxicated, looking to basically saying that he was not allowed on a flight, but his buddies were, and he was stuck at the airport, trying to fight the airport workers, trying to fight the security, the police officers that are there, becoming really belligerent and just really unlike anything that we expect from a professional and one of the good guys of the sport like Dustin Poirier. It's a shame, man. It's a real shame. And you could see afterwards him kind of sobering up and realizing what he did was wrong and not fighting the arrest. And Poirier's now made it clear, he's battled alcohol addiction, and some of it is a struggle because of the fact that he's retired now. Obviously he's got responsibilities, a job with the UFC doing post-fight stuff, doing studio stuff. The podcast that's on, what is it, CBS Sports Radio, or their podcast, the CBS Podcasting Network. They've got a UFC podcast he's doing with, I think it's Dean Thomas and Jorge Masvidal. But it's just, even with all that, when you're a fighter and you have dedicated your whole life to fighting, there's nothing like it. There's no other kind of feeling like it. And there's a lot of struggle for fighters. I mean, that's why sometimes you see fighters competing in older ages and looking, competing in a time in which they shouldn't be, and they're going way past their prime, way longer than expected. And it's sad. I feel for Dustin. I feel for his family. I feel for his fans. I am a fan of Dustin Poirier, and I want the best for him. So I really hope he's going to take the time, really work on himself. Maybe he goes to rehab and works on himself and helps himself, so that way he can be the best and he can be the Dustin that we know he can be. Because I met Dustin before, and I didn't have a bad interaction with him. Dustin was a gentleman. He was cool. He made time to talk to me. He made time to talk to people at the event that I saw him at. He was the man. So I'm really hoping for the best. All right. Speaking of the man, let's talk about the fighter who some still say is the man, Conor McGregor, who basically had his own form of, let's say, self-awareness, if you will, where he basically admitted to, as the kids say these days, getting lost in the sauce after becoming a two-time champion. So let me pull from ESPN, because they did a piece on him in the lead up, obviously, to next Saturday's UFC 329 event, where he'll have the rematch with Max Holloway. There we go. He did the interview with Paramount, but I'm going to take from the ESPN story. Here's his full quote. Fame has its pitfalls. You better move carefully in this world. For sure, probably even more so now. I've taken a lot of lessons in my life, and it's just about self-discovery. Studying yourself, learning triggers. I find myself even now still in a fight with an old version of me or old ways that don't serve me. Continue on. At 27 years of age, I had the game conquered. What more was I to do? I got lost in it. Made some mistakes off of that, and that's it. You'll always come back if you truly love something. You'll always come home. I mean, him admitting that he got lost in it. You think? All the different accusations and all the different wild stuff that we've seen, the fact that you were found by a jury of your peers to be guilty, criminally responsible or civilly responsible for the rape of Nikita Hand at the end of 2018? You think? And he admits that he got lost in it. And I feel like Nick and I and Zan and I have had conversation about this back in the day, but Conor McGregor, even now, Conor McGregor does not need to fight anymore. He admits himself. He did what no other fighter had done up to that point. And I have even, in this podcast network's past, long past, talked about how Conor McGregor had built a bigger brand for himself than the UFC. He was bigger than the UFC. He was a one-of-a-kind star. He was getting offers for different commercials, Hollywood, proper 12 whiskey, and the mistakes that he made, the crimes that he committed, the sins that he had done, and he paid for it in a very big way, to the point where I don't know what his value is. Not that he's not valuable. Obviously, he's still a celebrity. He's still a name. People are still going to tune in for this fight. I just wonder how many people are going to tune in for this fight. How many eyeballs are going to be on this sport? Obviously, I mean, on this event next week. Obviously, the UFC is going to promote this card tremendously. It may not be the greatest card of the sport, especially given, we're coming off of a really exciting UFC Baku event. We're coming off of a really exciting UFC Freedom 250 event, but it's still International Fight Week. It's still the UFC's version of WrestleMania. So obviously they want to go all out for it. It's unique in that, we're going to see Conor McGregor competing, and we're going to see Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway in a weight class that's completely different. We've seen Conor McGregor fight, once at welterweight? That was that Cowboy Cerrone fight that really doesn't matter much in the grand scheme of things. Conor McGregor hasn't had a meaningful win in the UFC since becoming the champ in 2016. So, better late than never, I guess, in self-admitting, but I need to see something from Conor McGregor. It's one thing to do this, showing off his fight shape, the custom money shorts, and showing him, working the bags, sparring. It's one thing to see all that. It's another thing to actually be in the middle of the action. He's doing all the old Conor McGregor things in the interviews, talking to Max Holloway in the split screen and all that. But nevertheless, it's not good, man. It obviously, again, better late than never, but you just wish somebody like Conor McGregor didn't go down this path in the first place. This path that led to him doing all these bad things. And as far as, is he going to take this fight seriously? What's going to happen next? Is he going to retire? Is he going to get a title shot off this fight? For everyone, I've had people come up to me and say, oh, Conor McGregor, he looks great. He's back to the Conor of old. He's going to knock out Max Holloway because Max Holloway has not fought in this sport at welterweight before. The size is going to be too much for him. McGregor's power is back. McGregor's power is going to be too much for him. McGregor beat him 13 years ago in Boston. It's going to be fantastic for McGregor. And then he's going to challenge either Justin Gaethje or Islam Makhachev. First of all, Gaethje and Makhachev have a lot more worthy challengers than Conor McGregor. Secondly, I think we need to slow our roll a little bit because everyone is forgetting something. Conor McGregor has not signed a new UFC contract as of this point. He is still fighting on the same deal that he's been, talking about for years now, where he has 2 fights left on the contract. So after next weekend, he will have just 1 fight left. Which means, do you really think the UFC is going to give up one of the most popular stars that this sport has ever seen? One of the most impactful stars that this sport has ever seen? You can talk about bad public image all you want. You can talk about associating yourself with Conor McGregor, but I talked about this before. When Conor does all the stupid stuff that Conor does, if you release him, somebody's going to pick him up. If you release him, he could, he's part owner of BKFC. He could do something crazy with Mike Perry and BKFC. He could go box Jake Paul. So in the UFC, when he does something stupid, it's like, oh, release him. It actually would hurt the UFC more if they release him. What they can do is just, hey, we don't associate with him. He hasn't fought in X period. We'll just put our feet up right here. They can just whatever. So you might sound very crazy to some people. This might be a little bit of a hot take, but I'll say it. I think this could be the last time we see Conor McGregor fight in the Octagon. And not because he's going to flat out retire. In fact, I'll actually go, the UFC probably hopes he retires. He lays the gloves down after this fight and rides off into the sunset with a great ending on a win, or that he loses and he accepts his days are done. Because then he has just one fight left. And, he can't go anywhere, because when you retire, UFC contract is basically just frozen, from my understanding. Like George Masvidal, when he retired, his contract was essentially just frozen. And if he resumes wanting to fight again, UFC has his contract. UFC is the one who offers fights. And as far as the whole thing about Dana White, I have to offer 3 fights. This is when, he throws some stupid names out to McGregor and McGregor, who doesn't need the money, doesn't need to fight, will just reject it. And he'll be like, I tried. So obviously McGregor's, I'm going to fight in April of 2027. Yeah, that's if the UFC is going to let you out of that contract. And they'd be stupid to. Then they don't want you to. They don't want you fighting Jake Paul and MVP in a boxing match or an MMA match. They don't want you fighting Nate Diaz anywhere outside the UFC. They don't want you and George Masvidal boxing. They don't want you and Mike Perry and BKFC. They don't want any of that. It's basically going to be the mindset of if we can't have Conor McGregor, then nobody else can. That's going to be the UFC's mindset. Now, if the viewership numbers on Paramount suck, then maybe you'll have a better shot. But I doubt it. I think it's going to be average, if not above average, for the UFC on Paramount because of the Conor McGregor's name. And if that's the case, welcome to purgatory again, where the UFC will say, we're not going to book you for an actual fight, give you anything real good until you sign a new contract. And Conor's going to say, no, set me free. Do one big last hurrah, spectacular gimmick show with me, and then I'll be on my merry way. That's not going to happen. So I think we're all this talk about title shots and the real McGregor being back and whatever. You gotta slow your roll, because at this point, I guarantee you, after UFC 329 is over, same as it ever was, and the contract issue is going to be right back. All right. Actually, it's 8 o'clock right now, so we're going to be a little over time here, but we'll do a big finish kind of thing with the remaining topics that we've got. We only got about 5 more topics that we got to go through, and we're going to do some trivia, obviously, to end the episode. But first, I want to tell you about Callan's Cranium. Shout out to my buddy Callan McClurg, who you can listen to, watch his show, Callan's Cranium, Wednesdays. So Wednesdays at midnight Eastern on the East Coast. That's Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Pacific time. When the lights go down, the deep dives begin. Join Callan McClurg for Callan's Cranium, airing Wednesday at midnight Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday nights. This is a late-night journey into the psychology, the strategy, and the fascinating oddities of the sports world. We explore the angles others miss and the stories that define the mental side of competition. If you're looking for a perspective that stays with you long after the final whistle, get inside the Cranium every week. Only on the Empty the Bench podcast, only on the Empty the Bench network. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/UP network. All right, let's do the big finish. Let's get through. All right, Ian Machado Garry is signing with Eddie Hearn. That definitely took me by surprise. And now that's two people that Eddie Hearn and his Matchroom Talent Agency have signed. You've got Tom Aspinall, who's the UFC heavyweight champion, and we still have no idea what is even going to happen with this. We're now hearing rumors that Aspinall Gone 2 will be made and probably could take place at Madison Square Garden this November, potentially November 14th, but nothing of that. And now Ian Machado Garry, a month and a half before he steps into the Octagon to challenge Islam Makhachev for the welterweight championship, signs with Eddie Hearn, who basically, by just what I implied, he, and I've talked about for weeks now, he and Dana White are basically just at each other's throats. A little bit of verbal scuffles, if you will, taking shots at one another. I have to wonder if that's going to hurt Ian Machado Garry standing within the UFC. Because it feels like, at this point, I know what Eddie Hearn is trying to do. But any UFC fighter who goes and signs with Eddie Hearn might just find themselves on Dana White's you-know-what list. Couple of main events that were announced. Forgot to talk about the first one last week. Dricus Du Plessis finally going to come back. His first fight since losing the middleweight championship. He's staying to take on Kamaru Usman. Middleweight main event at UFC Oklahoma City. This is going to be Usman's second fight at middleweight. He fought on short notice against Khamzat Chimaev a couple of years ago. Lost that fight. Majority decision, I believe. So solid performance from him, setting all that time away. Usman has not fought since defeating Joaquin Buckley in Atlanta. Is that last year? I believe that was last year. I don't know, man. I know Usman beat Buckley. I know Usman still wants to show that he has something in the tank, but for Dricus Du Plessis could give him some trouble. I'm not sure if he's ready for the kind of momentum and volume that Dricus Du Plessis can deliver within the first couple of rounds. Kamaru better be ready, otherwise, call me crazy, call me biased, because I'm on the Dricus Du Plessis hype train. I think Dricus Du Plessis could get the job done in 2 or 3 rounds. And then you got Anthony Hernandez versus Gregory Rodriguez at UFC Sacramento. And as much as I'm a Dricus Du Plessis fan, I'm on the hype train, as Zan likes to say, that other fight, the second fight, Hernandez-Rodriguez, Fluffy versus RoboCop. Oh, I'm eating my heart out. That is a fantastic fight. Fantastic booking by the UFC. And that one's going to come down to, Hernandez got to get that fight to the ground, because if he tries to trade with RoboCop and not RoboCop's strength, he's going to pay dearly for it. Hernandez is going to have to get this. He's going to have to tie Rodriguez up, get the fight to the wall, get the fight to the ground, and just unleash his power and volume there. Ketlen Vieira has signed with the PFL. Ketlen Vieira was a ranked women's fighter in the UFC, and now she's taking the jump and jumping ship, and she's gonna move up to featherweight, because PFL is adding one more event to its spectacular summer that it wants to do. It's PFL Tampa. Cris Cyborg will defend the women's featherweight championship for the final time. Cris Cyborg defending a title, the last time we will see Cyborg in MMA taking on Ketlen Vieira. I want to shout out Cris Cyborg for a legendary career. We'll do more of that as the fight gets closer. But yeah, for Ketlen Vieira, I mean, she traded off wins and losses. She's coming off the win over Jacqueline Cavalcanti back in May. That's the thing. She was ranked. And for some reason, they let her go. I guess they decided she wasn't worth what they pay. As if the UFC really pays its fighters anything, but that's besides the point. Speaking of, I talked about before, fighters fighting past their prime and doing some crazy thing. Joe Lozon. He's a legend. I don't know about this, man. BKFC event in February Park. I talked about it last week. But tremendous for this promotion. You didn't take BKFC serious before, you can now. But signing Joe Lozon, he's a top dog, but I don't know if I want to see that, man. I really don't know. And then here's an interesting one. Last one for today. The ESPN has always given out a best MMA fighter SB and a best boxer SB. They have been unified into one award, and Justin Gaethje is the only MMA nominee on the list. I'm going to pull up right now best fighter nominees. It's Justin Gaethje, Terrence Crawford, Gabriela Fundora, and Claressa Shields. I feel like Terrence Crawford might end up winning it because of the end of his legendary boxing career. I just don't know, man. Justin Gaethje had a hell of a run these last 12 months, winning the interim championship against Paddy Pimblett in a spectacular fight, and then pulling off the Hollywood-style ending for the White House card, and he finally unifies the lightweight title. I want to see Gaethje pull. And also, I hate this. I hate the unification of this award. MMA and boxing are two completely different disciplines, and both should be praised. Like, honestly, it should. I don't get it, man. I really don't get it. Trying to minimize things, trying to unify things. Enough with it. Why can't we? Things were fine as they were before. A best MMA fighter, a best boxer, a best WWE star. You don't need to unify everything at this point. Let's not have one sole best fighter. Let's have each discipline get something. That's the only way it's fair and makes sense in my mind. All right. Let me just give you a second here, and we're going to pull up our little trivia questions. All right. Test your IQ time to close things out here on this episode of Fight IQ. So last week, I asked you the following. Ian Garry challenging Islam Makhachev. I said, before Garry made his UFC debut in 2021, he held the welterweight title in what prominent European MMA promotion? The answer, Cage Warriors. I talked about UFC 112, and I asked what title fights were on that card, I believe, and the answer was Anderson Silva versus Demian Maia, and the co-main event, Frankie Edgar defeating BJ Penn, one of the UFC's greatest upsets for the lightweight championship. And then I asked that Yas Island got a moniker 10. So UFC 112 took place in 2010. 10 years later, they were back on Yas Island, where it was given a new moniker. What was that called? You fans who remember COVID time in the UFC? Fight Island, baby. And then I believe I asked about some legendary ballparks that used to host boxing. You could say Fenway Park, Yankee Stadium, Polo Grounds hosted some legendary boxing events. All right, let's get to this week's question, though. Ready? Number 1. Asu Almabayev shocked the world by hitting only the 4th Suloev stretch in UFC history. The first was pulled off by Kenny Robertson in 2013. The second and third Suloev stretches in UFC history took place at the same event, minutes apart from one another. What two fighters won with the Suloev stretch on the same night, and what event was it? Number 2. Talk about Dustin Poirier. Let's put a bright spot on Poirier. Let's give the man his flowers. With Dustin Poirier's retirement in 2025 heavily on our minds, let's look back at his legendary war-torn resume. Poirier famously holds the joint record for the most fight-a-night bonuses in UFC history. Who is the other absolute lightweight savage that he shares this record with? And number 3, Conor McGregor admitting he got lost in after becoming the first simultaneous double champ reminds us of how just how rare that feat is. Since Conor did it back in 2016, who are the other champs in UFC history? Who are the others that have held 2 titles simultaneously in UFC history? You got to name me everybody. And no, I'm not talking about holding, I'm not talking about Randy Couture style where he won one weight class's belt at one point in his career and then won another weight class title in another point. I'm talking about simultaneous. Like Conor was for a couple weeks simultaneous featherweight and lightweight world champion. Who else is a simultaneous world champ in UFC history? All right. That's going to do it for this edition of Fight IQ. Remember, no puncher's chance this weekend. Enjoy your 4th of July weekend here in the U.S. We'll be back next week, Monday night, July, I believe it's going to be the 6th. Yes, July 6th for a new edition of Fight IQ where we will preview UFC 329. And I thank you all for dealing with the technical difficulties of today. Some changes have had to be made because it's now the end of my school year, and some of the equipment that I helped myself to use for broadcasting here, I had to get back today. So I'm stuck with this older equipment until I can finish some equipment gathering on the other end, on this end, at the desktop end until then. But yeah, we'll be back next week, UFC 329 preview. Shout out to the 140 of you who have been tuning in, watching today. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network, youtube.com/ETB Network. If you're watching on the X platforms, make sure to come here, check us out here, and help us grow on this platform. But of course, on X, hit like, hit repost, hit quote post, share your thoughts on the episode, give your trivia answers. And then, of course, social media. Make sure to follow the show at Fight IQ ETB. Make sure to follow the Empty the Bench Network at ETB Network. And make sure to follow me on social media at Thomas J. Albano. All right? We'll catch you next week. This is Tom Albano saying good night. Good night.